just before we start going on about what assessment for learning is for us, and giving you practical ideas to use it and implement it. What does assessment for learning mean to you? Okay, what's assessment for learning, and what words come to your mind when I say assessment for learning? But please put any ideas you've got in the chat box. What is it? Any thoughts on that? Hello, Maria. Hello, Maria from Madrid. I can see we've got lots of people typing. Okay, looking at the picture, a reality. Okay, yeah. So I mean, the picture is sort of yeah, a little cartoon, kind of sort of showing that teaching is the same as learning, and I think that's part of it. Yeah, formative. Yeah, we're going to be. Thanks, Monica. We're going to be talking about those two words actually, formative and feedback, and the best ways to give it as well. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Good. Just as people are kind of continuing to put their opinions in the box. Yeah, evaluation. Exactly. Quite right. I'm going to just have a quick abstract that we wrote. We don't have to read all of it, but this is what we wrote and said we would do in the webinar. So this is our aim, isn't it? We want our learners to be more independent, and we want them to be responsible for their learning. Okay, so that's every teacher's dream, really. It's what we're all aiming for as teachers. We want independent students who are responsible for their learning. But we don't get those independent students just by giving them a free rein, of course, particularly at primary level. We need to offer them the right support. Okay. And enter assessment for learning, really. So assessment for learning can be includes many things. Practically speaking, it might include things like setting targets and goals, giving students feedback, as has been mentioned, self-peer assessment, and these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in today's webinar. Okay. The next slide, I've tried to draw a distinction between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. So again, I'm going to ask you to share this with me in the chat box. What would you understand by assessment of learning? What does it mean when we conduct assessment of learning as teachers? Has anyone got any ideas on that? Okay, what this difference is, and it's an important one. What's assessment of learning? I can see a couple of people typing. I'll just give them a second to come through. Okay. Okay, they're taking yeah, exactly. Okay, fine, good, Monica. So it's testing what they know, yeah. And what we've put here is evaluation of achievement. So maybe we're giving the students a letter. See, perhaps it's a numerical value, a 7, an 8, 70%. It might be to categorize students, to say, right, you're in the top set, you're in the middle set, you're in the bottom set. And we often talk about this as being summative assessment. So maybe an exam at the end of the year, just to be able to give that student a report or a report card or a grade. Okay, that's assessment of learning. Assessment for learning is a little bit more than that, I would say. So again, it is assessing what a student knows, but also taking into account where they're trying to get to and what they need to get there. So it's something of a journey, if you like, assessment for learning. And the focus of assessment for learning is on improving student learning, as you might expect, rather than categorizing students, which is more assessment of learning. Okay, assessment of learning we still do very much, perhaps doing it on its own is a little bit old school. Okay, so we're trying to build in assessment for learning into our teaching, and it's also called formative assessment, which I think somebody pointed out earlier on. Okay, good. So this journey idea, this is our little student at the bottom. I mean, perhaps he looks a bit older than a primary student because he's got a beard, but he's got a rucksack on his back. So where's he going? Well, what's the teacher's responsibility here? To tell him where he's going. Okay, so that would mean clarifying and sharing what the learning intentions are, the goals, okay, what we're going to learn. Okay, where is he now? The teacher needs to know where he is. So we would need to create tasks and activities that show evidence of learning, okay, so that we can measure what he's learned. Okay, how can he improve and how can he advance along his journey? Well, we need to provide him with the right type of feedback, okay, and that's something we're going to be looking at in the webinar today. Okay, so that's just a little bit of an introduction on assessment for learning. Now, this webinar is going to be split into 3 parts. So I'm going to be talking about target setting and learning intentions, okay, in the first part of the webinar. I'm going to briefly begin on teacher to student feedback before handing over to Elena, who will take the reins from there and also do the third section of the webinar on student to teacher feedback, okay? So let's have a look at the first. Target setting and sharing learning intentions. Okay, that's our first part. So again, I've got a little bit of a Pictionary for you here. So when we set our students a target, and I'm talking about a sort of a medium term or even a long term target, how should they be? Now the answer is the brand of that car. Okay, so does anyone know what brand that car is? Put it in the chat box if you think you know. Okay. Yeah, good, Monica. Thank you. Smart. So we're talking about smart targets. So again, when I used to teach, we used to set our students smart targets. This was in particularly towards upper primary and also in secondary as well. And you even find these smart targets in the world of business. So adults are setting these types of targets as well. Now it's an acronym. I wonder if anyone knows what the letters stand for or would like to hazard a guess. Okay, if you've heard of this, you might know some of the letters. There's sort of they each describe how the target should be. Any ideas on this? And we're going to I'll flash them up again. I'll flash them up anyway, and we can see if they yeah, simple. It's a good guess actually. And I think they should be as well. They should be certainly written in a way that the student understands them. Okay, there's no point in a teacher coming out with a weird and wonderful target that's not understood. It's for the student. But the acronyms stand for, or the letters stand for specific, so not too general, okay? Measurable, so there has to be a way for us to tell whether the student has met that target. Achievable or realistic, so it can't be something that's out of reach, although it should be challenging. Relevant, okay, so I guess if it's to do with what we're teaching and the curriculum, it will be relevant. Time-based as well. So again, we want to say to our students, you will learn this at some point. It's a bit more regimented than that. When will they've learned this by? Okay, so that's what the T stands for. People have given these other meanings as well. Okay, so you'll get people painting this in different ways. Might say this target should be stretching, which is true. I mean, we want to set a challenging target, although it should be achievable. It might be that the target is agreed upon, so it's kind of something that the student has come up with as well, because if the student set a target, then perhaps they're more likely to go for it rather than if we're just imposing targets on our students, of course. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay. Now, I think SMART targets like this, as I said, are very much medium-term goals or longer-term goals, and they are important. We wouldn't set one of those probably every lesson, but it is a good idea to share learning intentions every lesson. So every time we plan a lesson, we have in mind what students will be able to do at the end that they weren't able to do at the start. So there's a point to every lesson we teach, and we'll share that with them. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to. And indeed, by the end of the unit, you'll be able to. But my question here is, what's the point of sharing learning intentions? Why would we do that? Okay, I think it does make sense to share learning intentions every lesson and to say what the aim of the lesson is. But why would you do it as a teacher? Any ideas on that? Yeah, okay, thanks, Mary Carmen. Yeah, the students get involved and they find it useful. I think okay, so yeah, students know the purpose. So Yuli says she can't hear me. If everyone else could just sort of confirm whether they can hear me, um, I guess you can because you're interacting in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, okay, good. So I think there are lots of reasons, aren't there? It does give students a little bit of focus, and they see that the lesson has a point. So they see every little activity they do in the lesson is leading towards something, some kind of goal. So it does focus them. And the idea is to get them so more aware of their learning and responsible for their learning. Certainly aware, because if you say, sometimes as a parent will say to a student, "Oh, what did you learn today?" and the child and say, "Well, I don't know." Don't. So again, we sometimes need to point learning out to our students. Okay. Of course, if we're giving a target and a name and sharing learning intentions at the start of the lesson or the unit, we would want to refer back to them at the end of the unit. Okay, so you can see here the first picture, we've got little can-do descriptors where the student analyzes on a scale of 3 how well they think they can do what they set out to do. Okay, so do they think they've met their targets? But so that our students need to go back to them at the end of the lesson or the unit too. The second picture shows a project you can see where students have to talk about a healthy lunchbox. Okay, so they have to give a little presentation about their lunchbox and the healthy food they eat. And again, this project comes at the end of a unit. It comes in the last lesson. But I would say, let's mention this project at the start of the unit, okay, so that students can see that they're working towards something. Okay, so all these little activities are being done with a greater goal in mind. Okay, a performance, if you like. So I think it's definitely worth showing students where they're going at the end of the unit. Finally, we've got 2 pictures here of children who are giving a presentation. As you can see, this one is on a planet, an imaginary planet that they've created. And what we've done here is we've taken a photo of them, and I think this is a good idea to use for the next year. So once again, when our next year students are doing this project, we can show them what they're aiming for, so it becomes quite tangible and real for them. This could be a photo, or it could even be a video as well. Okay. What else do we need to do? Well, we need to, and the picture describes this, we need to signpost learning. So we're talking about setting targets at the start and referring back to them at the end, but all the way through the class, we want to be pointing out to students that they're learning. When they show us evidence of learning, we are explicit and we mention it. So that's great. We said we would learn 10 animals. I can see you already know 5. That's brilliant. You're well on the way. I'm happy about that. Okay. So again, this type of thing, again, is the idea is making them aware of learning and giving them making them take responsibility, but also praising students and raising their self-esteem. Okay, so this idea of signpost learning, pointing out that learning's taking place. Practically speaking, in many classes, I've seen an achievement board. So these these targets that students are setting and learning aims that they're trying to meet are up on a board. Okay, you can see them here. And as we meet our targets, a student would go up with a star on behalf of the class and put that star next to that target. Again, making learning explicit, and we can keep pointing to the board and pointing out to our students what it is that they're learning. Okay. So consider having one of those in your classes, an achievement board, all of the things that your students are learning. Okay. Good. So that's just a little bit on targets and goals and sharing intentions and signposting learning. Okay, I'm just going to start us off in on part 2 before Elena continues. And I've got here forgetful looking chap, and you can't remember what part 2 is about again. So I wonder if you guys remember. Were you paying attention in the introduction? Could you tell me what I was going to talk about in part 2, or what we were going to talk about in part 2? What was it on? Okay, very specific. I was thinking someone's going to say feedback, but Mary Carmen got teacher to student feedback. Good, thanks. Right, so what have I got here? I've got a list, as you can see. What does this list show? Well, it shows the impact of different factors on student learning. Okay, and this comes from a study. It comes from a meta study by a guy called John Hattie. A meta-study is a study of many other studies, and this was a study of 800 studies and 80 million students. So it was quite big as studies go, quite a big sample size. And what did he find had the biggest impact on student learning? What had the biggest impact on student learning? Well, feedback. Okay, so he found that feedback, when done correctly, was what had the biggest impact on learning, bigger than all these other factors. He found that student cognitive ability was very important, but we're not going to focus on that because there's nothing we can do about it, but there is something we can do about feedback. Okay, so feedback then is pretty important. But what is it? Okay, before we go on with the webinar, what does feedback mean to you? What do we, this really important thing, feedback, what is it? Okay, can anyone give me any ideas in the chat box as to what feedback is? Revising, yeah, could be. Any other ideas? Evaluation, yeah, yeah, part of it. Corrections, yeah, definitely, that's part of it. Yeah, okay, we're getting some good ideas in the chat box. And I'm just going to briefly start on feedback before Elena gives you lots of practical ideas of ways of conducting feedback in your classes. So, yeah, support as well, Mary Carmen, definitely. So here we've got our teacher and our student, okay? And we might think that feedback goes from the teacher to the student, which it does. But feedback also comes from the student to the teacher. So every time the student is given a chance to show what they know, that's feedback towards the teacher. Okay, so this can be something so simple as asking a student a question. Okay, but although there's often a lot more to it than that. Okay, let's have a look at teacher to student feedback, which was the first part. So when we're giving students feedback, what might be the first thing that comes to mind? Well, a grade. Okay, so this is feedback, isn't it? So you put 6 out of 10 on the bottom of a piece of work. Okay, there are problems obviously with grading that also borne out in study. So an issue here, certainly I found when I was teaching, is that if you just put a number on a piece of work, a student will just immediately look at that number and perhaps cast the work aside. Okay, even if you've written comments as well and a number, the number is the central is what the students are looking for on their work. What did I get as a number? But we need to make them pay attention to those comments. Okay, and again, this is something that studies show as well, that students pay much more attention to corrected work if there's just comments and not a grade. So what I advocate here is for a teacher to write comments on work, and then students to receive that work back and act on those comments before they see what their number was, their grade was. So they receive that number after acting on the comments and taking the feedback into account. Okay, and Elena, I'm going to hand over to her now because she's going to go into a little more detail on that. So all yours, Elena. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, so as Michael was saying, if we just give the students a mark, they normally what they do is just they look at it, or they just cast it away, or even they want to compare to each other. So that's what they do. Okay, and what Michael was saying about comments being more powerful, this has been studied a lot. Okay, and I like to mention these two studies by Butler and Hattie. Okay, and they said that obviously comments are much more effective than grades, right? However, we need to know which comments we need to write to our students. Okay, because some of them will be effective and some of them will be not. So I'm going to give you some examples. But just bear in mind that the comments that our students will take profits of is comments that will help them to improve, okay, to move forward, and to make our pupils think. Okay, that's very important, not just random comments. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples, and I want to ask you, which of these you think they're not very appropriate for your students? Some of these comments, they're not helping them very much. Which ones? Okay, I see Monica saying work harder, so A. Okay, 4 out of 10. All right. Use some of them. Yeah, I'm not saying all of them are wrong, okay? I'm saying that some of them could be more appropriate than others. Okay, so we've got some answers. All right. So let's see. As you can see, the ones in red, and some of you already spotted, are not very appropriate. Work harder. Okay, this is kind of negative. I think some of you were commenting before that you need positive feedback, okay, and you need to create this atmosphere in class. 4 out of 10, this is not telling the students much about how to improve and how to get a better grade next time. So by its own, it's not very meaningful for them. And then G, plug your brain in. This one is kind of negative too. Okay, so the most powerful ones, okay, the most appropriate would be the ones in green, because they are very specific. Okay, they're telling the students what to do next. Okay, so how to bridge the gap that there is between their learning now, okay, and what they need to do or to get better. Okay, so that's you're giving them a lot of support. If you look at the comments in yellow, all right, they're okay, but maybe they're not enough because they're not being very specific. If you look at F, you need to structure better. Okay, you're giving them some clues, but you're not really telling them what to do. So if you compare that that comment with H, you need to write in paragraphs. You'll see the difference. Okay, so H is a little bit more specific. All right, good. What about you did a great job, Maria Jesus? I mean, I think it's wonderful. I mean, we need positive reinforcement. We need positive comments. But I would just suggest that you add something else, okay? I mean, if it's perfect, you need to say anything else, of course, okay? But you can explain, okay, you did a great job, and then saying, because you described this animal perfectly or something, okay? So explaining why, be specific about what was good about their job, okay? Good. All right, some other ways of giving feedback to our students is using rubrics. I wonder if you guys use rubrics in your classes. Maybe you do. If you're teaching in Spain, you probably do, because that's something that we are required to do. Yes, I do. Okay, so why do we use rubrics? Well, it's a requirement, but what are they for? What's their purpose? What would you say? See, to assess. Okay, so giving feedback, of course, yeah. All right. I see some people typing. Well, I'll give you the answer. Okay, so it's to assess, yes, and it's to tell the students where they are now and what they need to do in order to improve. Okay, we can find fun ways to write a rubric. For instance, we've got these writing rubrics, the hamburger rubric, okay, which is probably more motivating for the students to see that instead of like just a number. So if you just give them, you know, the bread, the buns of the hamburger, it means that, you know, they're not there yet. Okay, they need to keep on building the hamburger. So if they want to eat it, okay, they need to do a little bit more. And okay, I took these two rubrics from Pinterest. I'm sure you know this online tool where you can find some rubrics made by other teachers that you can download and sometimes edit. Okay, and another tool will be rubrics. Okay, the one in purple. And with this one, with this tool, it helps you to convert the rubric score into a percentage. Okay, so if you have the percentage and then the comment, then that mix will be nice, will be better. Okay, remember we need comments and numbers together. Okay, so what do we include in a rubric? Normally, we include things like content, organization, vocabulary, grammar. Okay, but remember that sometimes we need to add more things depending on our class, okay, especially if we're talking about the little ones, okay, like low primary. So maybe you need to consider other things such as presentation and effort. Okay, those are other things that you might include. Good. Then you can also use checklists, okay, that you can take ideas from the rubrics and create a checklist for your students to assess their own work, okay? And so you can tell them, okay, I included the new words learned in class, and they have to tick whether they did it or not. So this way they'll be aware of what they are doing, okay, and you're helping them to become more independent. If you're working with little ones, you can use smiley face, okay, so instead of them writing a tick, they can just write how they feel about something. Okay, good. Right. Another thing you can do to give feedback to your students is just show them a model, okay, of writing, for instance, from a student who did a good job, okay, but not just a perfect writing, but from someone who improved his or her writing a lot, okay, so that students know that improving, okay, is important, okay, and that's something successful. And this is gonna motivate them, and that's gonna give them a lot of pride, okay. And in class, you can all analyze why this this piece of writing is good, okay. Now, something that you can do with, again, with low primary is a very nice activity that I like, okay, and it's a kind of non-threatening way of giving feedback, and it's called 2 stars and a wish, okay. So imagine that the students have written or have created a card in which they had to describe a helpful or caring animal, all right? And the way of giving feedback, okay, just writing comments would be 2 stars with something they did good and something they need to improve, which would be the wish, okay? So you can tell them, okay, I like the picture of your animal as something positive, or I like how your animal helps people. All right, so it's something positive again. And then something they need to improve that it wasn't so correct. Okay, I wish your card described the animal a bit more. Okay, and you tell them what they need to do. So, for example, describe the size and what they eat. All right. Another way of giving feedback to your students, and maybe not so threatening either, is using acronyms. Okay, so for example, you can use this POET acronym, all right, in which you're going to consider presentation, objective, effort, and things to improve. And next to each category, you're going to draw a smiley face. Could be green, very smiley, then medium, and then sad. Okay, and that's telling them how they did. So again, if they did it, I mean, if they got a green face, maybe you don't need to add anything else. Okay, or maybe you do, like I was saying before, like you did great in this specific thing. Or if they got a medium face, okay, you should write comments. Okay, so for instance, in this project, they had to describe a healthy lunchbox. Okay, and if you wrote medium face next to objective, you could say, okay, not all of the food you described was healthy. So, well, that's the comments you could add in. Okay, good. So far, so good. Okay. Now, next move to part three. I can see some people are asking questions, and I don't have time now to to be looking at the questions, but hopefully at the end of the webinar, I'll try to answer those questions. Okay, and I'm sure Michael is taking notes. Okay. So the third part was student to teacher feedback, which is something really, really important. I mean, our students need to inform us about our teaching, okay, and how they're doing, okay. This is something we do in our classes constantly. Sometimes we don't realize we're doing this, but we're doing it, okay. Something common we do, okay, is that the students write an end of the unit progress test in which they show what they can do. Okay, so for instance, they can identify these animals, or they can describe them, asking questions about them. Okay, and this could be linked to what Michael said at the beginning. So this could be linked to the to setting the objectives, or to share the learning objectives with your students at the beginning of a lesson, okay, or of a unit, and then at the end, okay, you see if they match, okay, if they fulfilled all those learning objectives. All right, so let's look at some other maybe more creative ways of getting feedback from our students. All right, something you could do is a whole class feedback. Okay, so each student will have a mini whiteboard, but I know this is expensive to buy one mini whiteboard for each student. So what you can just do is have a laminated flashcard, okay, and the students just write on it, and then they'll be able to erase it easily, okay. So you ask them a question, for instance, how do you spell brother? And then they hold their cards, okay, and they show it to you. All right, so you'll have a clear picture of, you know, if they're understanding, or I mean, if they understood this question, okay, or what are these if you're working with vocabulary. What did you do last night? Maybe more complicated for high primary, okay. This is something they also can do as a peer assessment. So you ask the question, and then they show it to each other, okay, and they see if they find any problems or any mistakes, and they see which ones are correct, okay, so they can help each other, okay. Or another question you could ask, okay, is if we refer back to the learning objectives, you can ask them, okay, can you describe your pet to the class? And then they just draw smiley face and they show you how they feel about it, if they feel confident or not. Okay, so they can show you 3 levels of understanding. On a similar vein, we have another way of feedback, and this is called the school bus. And what you can do here, okay, you can you can draw a school bus, okay, on the board, like a big one. And then you can ask a question, like, for example, can you describe pet? Okay. And then the students will draw their face at the front. If they say yes, okay, if they feel confident, they will draw their face in the middle of the bus. If they feel so-so, okay, if they are not really sure about it, and at the back, if they're not really sure about it, okay, if they don't really feel confident, if they don't think they can really describe an animal or a pet. In order to do this, obviously, it's really important that you create an atmosphere in your class in which, you know, your students know that it's okay to say that you don't understand something. Okay, so create a positive atmosphere. That's really, really important. And I think somebody was mentioning it before at the beginning of the webinar, to create this positive environment in class, okay, and the students feel happy. All right. Again, you can also you can use this information, okay, when you see all the students' faces around, okay, to do something. I mean, to reteach something. So if you see that most of your students draw their faces at the back, okay, that means that you need to reteach something, okay, maybe you need to recycle it later. So that's informing your teaching too, okay. And also it's a way to know which ones are more confident, which group is more confident with something, which aren't, okay. So you can have established different ways of working with something, okay. So maybe have the students at the front together and do maybe a more difficult activity, and then help the ones who draw their faces at the back. Okay, so there are many things you can do from this. They can also draw their bus on their notebooks, okay, at the end of each unit, and then they can see their progress, and they can see the different units with their faces, okay. So, well, many things. Another way, Michael was mentioning the idea of having the students telling their parents, okay, what did you do at the school today? And sometimes they don't even know. Okay, they say, well, we just sang a song or something like that. Okay, so something you can do to remind them what they did in class that day is that at the end of the lesson, the students line up, okay, and you nominate 3 students, and you ask them 3 questions. Okay, so for instance, did you describe an animal today? How do you say whatever in English? What was your favorite activity? So this is a way of reminding them what they did. Okay, and that will help them to kind of fix those learning objectives at the end of the lesson. Okay. Something a little bit more complicated you can do with maybe high primary, okay, is for them to correct mistakes. Okay, so that would be something like self-assessment. This is a classic, the option, and you just give your students a mix of correct and incorrect sentences that you took from their previous writings, okay. And in teams or in pairs, they have to say how they feel about that sentence, whether they think, okay, the sentence is right or wrong. Okay, and after they decide, they just give that sentence a number of points from 10 to 100. according to their the way, I mean, according to their certainty. And after they can just they can just exchange papers with another pair, and then when you correct the sentences, the other pair will be saying, okay, you said this sentence was right, and you gave this sentence 60 points, but it wasn't right. Okay, so you lose 60 points. So they will be making the maths. Okay, they will be doing the maths, sorry. And well, you can have like a competition, and then the group who's getting more points will win or something. Okay, and it's important, I think, that you set up a time to do this. Okay. Another way of correcting mistakes. Okay. So you've taken some pieces of writing, okay, and instead of giving them the answer, okay, for the mistakes, you just underline them. Normally, like vocabulary and grammar mistakes, okay, and then you give it back to them, and you give them a chance to earn more points. All right, so they have to correct their mistakes. This could be a little bit difficult, okay, so you have to consider their age, and also you have to consider their level, okay. And as a previous activity or as an alternative, what you can do is do this in class as a whole class activity. So you show them a piece of writing, okay, and they have to point the mistakes. And as a class, you also tell them to correct the mistakes, and maybe to explain why there was a mistake in grammar, for instance. Okay, that will be the next step. All right, so that's bringing us to the end of this webinar. So today, I hope we and you, okay, we've learned about target setting and learning intentions that Michael explained. And then we talked about feedback, teacher to student, student to teacher, also peer assessment, self-assessment. And finally, my last requirement would be in the chat box. I would like you to type anything that you think is useful for your classes, that you're going to try in your classes. Okay, so I'm gonna try 3 questions, 3 students, okay, hamburgers, okay, or rubrics, check at the end of the unit what they think they've learned. Okay, I've seen some people. I'm gonna try whiteboards, okay, or laminated cards, auction, right? So many ideas. Okay, that's very nice to hear. I don't know if you have any questions that I didn't see. Or Michael, I don't know if you spotted any questions.
If somebody had a question, else you might use rubrics with, Elena. I answered it myself in saying that I guess I would use them with the productive skills, so they can be effective with speaking as well, and also used to use them with peer assessment for speaking. So you get students to sort of listen out for certain things they're supposed to hear, and be ticking them off in their rubrics. So I would say the productive skills. I'm not sure if there are any other questions.
Okay, acronyms. Yeah, okay. Could you repeat where to get the rubrics? Yeah, sure. One of them was Pinterest. Let's see if I can find the slide. Okay. Pinterest and rubrics. Let's see here. All right. So those are the 2. I'm sure you can, I mean, there are many other online tools, but these are the ones I like.
Okay, I think I'll just wrap up with the last 2 slides then, Elena. So here you can see the where we were talking about the importance of feedback being shown in studies. So we've included which studies they are. The book which the examples came from is a primary book called Pop Tropica English Islands. Okay, it's a Pearson book. And then finally, here you can see myself and Elena's email addresses. So if you've got any questions or any doubts about anything, don't hesitate to shoot us an email. And finally, myself, Elena, and the teacher training department manager, Brian Enquist, we write blog articles on our blog page, which is eltlearningjourneys.com, about many things in ELT, often practical ideas for lessons. So feel free to check it out and see if it's of interest to you. So just for me, thanks very much for giving up an hour of your evening and listening to us in the webinar. We hope you've had found a few ideas that you are going to try in your classes that you found useful. And I'll just hand it to Elena to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you very much for being there. I also saw that Maria Jesus, she wrote something about somebody called Jose Merino, who wrote, I think, a book about English or something. Well, I don't know this person, so he's not a relative, but thank you. I'll check it out. Okay, so thank you, everybody, and have a nice evening. Okay, and I'll see you around. Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. Anuri and Nana Merino. Wow. Too many. Bye.